G'day and welcome to Daily Insights and Storytellings with me, Moon Willow. Before I move into anything else, I'd like to remind you, if you haven't already, if you wouldn't mind hitting that subscribe button. Thumbs up if you're enjoying what you're coming across, or thumbs down, either way. There is also a notification bell, but I know through my own subscriptions that it will find you anyway. But if you want to sort of be notified almost straight away when I put one of these out, I believe that's how that notification bell works. To be fair, I'm not entirely sure, but we'll pretend. So it's I'm really pleased that you've joined me again today. One of the things I've noticed in the past sort of couple of days, well, I've noticed noticed several things really, but I've been highlighted other channels, etc., and have been pleasantly surprised to notice that we're all sort of speaking about similar things. So I'm not entirely sure where my storytellings come from. I know that I do link into dragon energy, and some of what I say comes from them. And over the years, I've also noticed that I just get random thoughts in my head when I'm speaking with people, and more often than not, it is actually relevant to them and their own stories. So I have a feeling that that's some of what I'm tuning into, and what I consider as the energy of the collective that joins me on here. As I've said in the past, it does seem to work that although you're clearly not in my home at the moment contributing on a physical level, is certainly contributing on an energetic level, and that seems to be coming through really clearly, which I really love. The other thing that I've sort of noticed, and sort of built on yesterday when I was speaking very much about grounding and the need for that, just so that you're not feeling quite so battered by the energies that are happening. And in everything that I've seen and felt for myself, is that over the next couple of weeks, this is probably going to sort of reach a sort of a crescendo, as it were. And I know I've mentioned sort of like the solstice on the 21st of December. Again, it doesn't matter whether that is winter or summer, there is going to be a really huge shift. Now, according to some people, I'm not an astrologer. I don't fully understand how that works. I can only go from my own sense and understanding. But it's almost like that's going to be the tipping point and going into something called the Age of Aquarius. But from my perspective and my sense of it all, is that that is going to be the real fork in the road, as it were, as to which vibrational energy that we are more connected to. And it's not a test. It's not. I know which way I feel more drawn to. That doesn't necessarily mean that I'm right. And in all of these storytellings, I can only express my opinion from my own understanding, and very aware that other people's perspectives is different, and that's fine. It's about making sense of the world we live in, and that's always been, for 50 years on this planet, that's always been my desire, is to try and understand the planet on which I live. And if you look at things like the Bible and other stories, we won't go into a religious debate around that, but my understanding and the way I always perceived it as a child in regards to the Bible was, it was a collection of stories to try and understand the world that people were living on in a time where they appeared to have less information, although more recently I have sort of changed that idea within my head. And to me, it actually seems that they had more of a clear connection with source, so that the stories they were telling were actually quite real to them. But it's like any stories. The stories we tell ourselves are very real to us, and it's the way we make sense of the world we live in, so that we can have meaning of the world we're walking on, and the reasons why we choose to do things, especially when we blindly follow stuff and we don't necessarily understand why. It just feels right underneath, and that's more than okay. The other sort of thing that I've sort of I sort of noticed this morning was that, going back to grounding, and please bear with me, I know that I'm sort of circling a little bit so far today, but the thing that I've noticed is that with grounding and putting my shields up, it's almost like it works for a day, but then I've got to change it slightly just to sort of feel more calm, really. It's a bit like the eye of the storm. So the storm's still raging outside. There's still the light energies, the dark energies. And if I lower my shielding, my protections, then I feel the impact more. But what I've noticed by actually getting back into my daily routine of looking after myself on an energetic level, that I'm feeling calmer within, and it feels like it's easier to flow through my day, flow through my life. Still impacted by a lot of dreams overnight, but feeling less tired when I wake up. So it's almost like it's presented to me in a way that actually helps move me forward without getting lost in it. So I do really recommend really grounding on a daily basis, twice daily basis, and just sort of noticing if you're feeling like you're reacting to something in a way that feels disproportionate to what's actually occurring. It's taking that step back and that breath, really centering in ourselves, and trying to understand why that's coming through, or understanding our response to it, because it might be that the response is appropriate, but it's, as I said a couple of days ago, it's working from an offensive point of view as opposed to a defensive point of view. Because if we're working from a defensive point of view, we can get really lost in the old storylines, as opposed to actually sifting through, recognizing where it comes from, recognizing where the links are internally, so that we can actually make that informed decision as to how we walk forward or not, or we avoid it. It gives us the information to make a more informed decision as to how we're going to progress forwards. So with all of that, I know that probably feels quite chaotic and is actually fairly reflective of the chaos that I believe is out there. So it really is a case of really centering and grounding and coming back to us, coming back into our internal self, having that real sense and understanding as to how we would like to progress forward. And by taking those little steps, I really feel that that's what's going to manifest along the way. But that's not to say that we're not coming up for a bit more turbulence and a bit more tricky ride along over the next couple of weeks. May actually be a bit longer than that. I'm not entirely sure, but I'll keep checking in with that. The other sort of bit within that as well is that before I put one of these out, I try and avoid watching too many other things, so that I can be sort of fully present with our energies and sort of speaking hopefully more of the energies that are coming through for me and us, those of you who are sort of watching me, so that I can unpack it a little bit or unpick it a little bit from our perspective. Not necessarily simplify it, because I probably don't, but just trying to give my take on it, as it were. But I'll always be influenced by other people, because that helps inform me as I go along over the days. So seeing So that jumped into my hand as I was twisting around. So that is Solidite, a nice piece of Solidite. Quite tiny really. I do have other pieces of Solidite throughout my home. As you could imagine, I've got quite a few crystals, to be fair. So Solidite is about the throat chakra, which is quite apt considering I am speaking with you, I'm conversing with you definitely from my throat chakra, but it's so not necessarily clearly today, and it's almost like I have a huge amount that I have this desire to put across, and I'm tripping myself up a little bit with that. So the throat is very much part of how we communicate, but not just communicating on an external level, but on internal level as well. And I've mentioned this in the past when throats come up, is how we actually react and respond to ourselves, especially if we're having a knee-jerk or a defensive reaction to what's going off in our world, and we catch ourselves doing that. There is the temptation to give ourselves a hard time for going down an old route that didn't serve us well in the past. It's changing that internal language, that internal dialogue into, oh, that's interesting. What is it about that makes me feel like I go back into that particular pattern, into that particular storyline? What is it that I can change? How can I change the way I feel about it so that I can shift it across into a path that actually is more aligned with all of me, so that I can actually continue to take steps in a manner that suits who I am and how I choose to live my life, instead of sort of reacting all the time. So that's what's coming out for me at the moment. So if you can focus on the cards for me while I shuffle. I really like the concept that we're all a part of this. Stop shuffling there. I have a lot of hair. It gets in the way sometimes, but I really love it. Okay. So split, shuffled, split. So today's cards are a woman, clouds, and a garden. So starting with the woman, so very much with where we're progressing into sort of like the Aquarian age. A lot of people identify that with going into sort of a matriarchal society. So very much the divine feminine. So allowing our emotions to flow basically, and not trying to cut them off, not trying to suppress them, but being aware of them, being aware that in certain situations we feel fearful, that we've got that anxiety or that agitation, that's okay, but it's taking that deep breath and really having a conversation with our internal self, trying to understand what it is that's feeling out of sync and out of kilter, and how can we merge and integrate that back into ourselves, so that we can actually take that emotional well-being and take that forward, so that we can actually be kinder to ourselves and consequently other people around us. So yeah, so it's very much sort of that more emotional shift. And one of the things that a lot of astrologers are talking about at the moment is the upcoming eclipses. So there's a lunar eclipse, I think, don't hold me to this. I know there's an eclipse due on Monday. I'm not entirely sure whether it's a solar or solar would be sun or lunar, but I'm not entirely sure. But whenever there is eclipses going off out there, that certainly can have a huge impact on us on an internal level. The moon itself has a huge impact on our emotional tides. We're made up of a lot of water, so we I know that there is disagreements out there within the scientific community, but from my point of view, and watching in environments where people are more vulnerable and more inclined to actually respond to the lunar cycle, and myself included, that it does have that huge impact. And we're coming up to a full moon at the beginning of next week, so that to me that is going to heighten our emotional state and actually bring a lot more up. So within that, we've got the clouds next. So the clouds are sort of being aware, I think, right, so what's coming through for me is that we're not going to, cloudy thoughts. So for all that we may be feeling more secure and in the eye of the storm more peaceful, it's like there is that storm out there, and that can actually bring clouds and darker thoughts coming through. So as I was saying, in regards to having a emotional response to the things that are going off on the third dimensional level, where we are impacted, where we're impacted by the darker forces, that we can end up reacting to it without actually taking that time to have a breath. But it's being very aware and conscious of the cloudy thoughts that can come across at that point, and how that actually then impacts how we're feeling about the whole scenario. So again, it's very much about, and I know I keep saying it, but it is very much about grounding. It's taking that moment to come back within, to center, to feel more secure, to put up our boundaries and our shields, so that what we're looking at is actually our own, and that we're making decisions based on our internal landscape. The outside information is important, and I'm not saying that we disregard it, but it's actually having, so sometimes when I put shields up, I envisage that I've got rose bushes around me, so that when comments or energy comes towards me, that it has a barrier that it has to get through. So it gives me an opportunity to have a look at it, to see whether I want to accept that into my internal self, my internal landscape, whether that's actually going to help harmonize and help me feel more connected, or whether that's going to produce a disconnect or disharmony within. If it's the latter, what I have set up with that is a way for that to actually be taken through the rosebush down into earth, into Gaia, and have that transmuted, because I don't believe in sending it back to people. I think I have enough karma from previous lives and this current one without creating any more. Plus, I don't want to hurt other people, because I don't feel that a lot of people, or what's going off, is actually intentionally done. Again, I think it's coming from a knee-jerk space. So my power, my way of being able to deal with that is to actually put that into Gaia, and have her transmuted into another energy, because I think that energy energy is never got rid of. It's always transmuted or changed into something that is actually more serving a greater good, as it were. So in this, it's very much, and especially with the Solidite as well, it's very much being aware of how that thought process, that darker thought, those cloudy opinions can actually come through, and have that internal conversation, internal dialogue with ourselves. So the throat chakra here for me at the moment is very much about how we speak to ourselves, and how we perpetuate particular cycles as well, especially if we don't take our energy health as an important part of our daily routine. And I really feel that our energetic health is a very important thing. And those of you who've been listening to me on a daily basis will know that since I started reintroducing my daily routines, I'm feeling more centered, and less impacted. I'm aware that there's still a lot of negative and positive impacts going off out there, but I'm less impacted by it because I have those shields and protections. And the last card is the Garden, so about community and spaces that we become involved in. So again, so we have, and I really love the fact that we have this community developing through this the daily storytellings, daily insights and storytellings, and it's being mindful of the relationships and the communities that we're joining. Some of them, they may appear to be really good, but it brings up an internal friction, as it were, and can bring up that sort of cloudy aspect, and sort of like all that negativity towards our emotional state. And it's actually sort of, again, taking that step back and really having a feel around whether that community that we belong to is actually one that is helping us and giving us comfort and nurturing, that's the word I wanted, nurturing and nourishing who we are and the path that we're choosing to take. So very much being aware in all those different communications, external, internal, the different communities that we belong to. And as I said the other day, there's some situations and some sets of group periods of people that we're joining up with that we can't really avoid. So like when we go into a work situation, there will be people there that we wouldn't necessarily choose to actually mix with under a normal circumstance. But as we put our shields up and feel more grounded, their energies won't actually impact us as much as they would do in the past, because we're clearer with ourselves. If we actually have that internal dialogue and have an understanding and awareness what it is within those relationships that send us off kilter, that send us a little bit unstable, then we can actually protect ourselves, or use a similar idea as me and have that sort of energy avoid us, miss us, and go into the ground. It's not being unaware of it, it's not acknowledging it, but actually doing something constructive with it. So instead of sort of knee-jerking, hitting it back to them, it's actually looking at it, is there any validity in that? Does that help me? Does that serve me in the path that I want to take? Or is it something that doesn't belong to me? And then pop it back into earth to be transmuted, or equally send it up to source for that to be changed at the same time. So I'm hoping this is making sense to people out there. I really am getting the sense. So the Solidite and the throat chakra seems to be working on overdrive for me today, because I seem to be a little bit all over the place. But that just may be my experience. I don't know whether that's how you're experiencing it. I'm hoping that is making sense for people. So in mind of the throat chakra, we'll see what sound wants to come out today in relationship to all of this. Well, that was a bit strange inside. It started off, you really felt it going up at the end on an energetic level. So I'd be intrigued to find out if that's something you experienced or not. So if there is any sort of questions you have for yourself and would like to have an individual reading, just contact me through my website or the various platforms that I will put in the description box. Really appreciate you all joining me on this journey and the storytellings. I'm finding some very intriguing insights along the way, so I'm hoping that you're enjoying those too. Enjoy the rest of the day. I will be back tomorrow and have no clue never do, as to where the stories will end up taking us. The tales and the weaving of it has got its own flow, which I'm really loving. So I love you all, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye for now.